Thomas,
Ready?
are you rolling?
Rolling.
Thank you. Okay.
When did you serve?
I served from June 1967 to September 1970. That's 3 years, 1 month, and 26 days.
How old were you when you decided to join?
I didn't decide to join, Jasmine. I was drafted. In that era, in the 60s, we still had a draft. And that's why the distribution of responsibility was far more equitable. It was spread across America. And you had sons of famous and wealthy people, and you had sons of poor people. So it was far more democratic representation in that time as opposed to the all-volunteer Army today.
Which branch did you serve in, and why did you choose that branch?
Well, I didn't get to vote on it, but I was an Army, initially an Army draftee who went through basic and infantry AIT and then through infantry OCS, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant.
What was your MOS?
My MOS was 1542. That stands for Airborne Infantry Advisor.
And can you describe what you had to do?
Well, my work involved supporting, teaching, training militia in South Vietnam, the villagers. I helped them defend their villages. I taught them how to use their weapons, how to patrol, how to set up ambushes, and when they got into trouble, I would call in Phantom jets or Huey Cobras or artillery or mortar support, and when they were wounded or dead, I would get them dusted off to a hospital or to a morgue.
What was your first duty station?
My first duty station was Fort Benning, Georgia. When I was commissioned after graduation, my orders were for Special Forces. But at that time, in 1968, there was an incredible need for more infantry leaders, and so tactical officers are the men who train future officers. I had 2 TACs. I hated them. They're on the wall. But it's the highest priority at that time in the Army, so because I was a rather distinguished graduate, I had my orders for Special Forces pulled, and I became a training officer at Fort Benning, Georgia. I did that for 6 months. And when I was done, they said, write your ticket. And I said, I'd like jump school, ranger school, special warfare school, Vietnamese language school, and I don't want to work with Americans. And I got everything I asked for.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about why you made those recommendations, those requests?
Yes, I had been in touch with quite a few men having returned from combat. We had been in Vietnam by then more than 5 years. And I was a young, black, hard-charging infantry officer who was drafted, and I didn't want to have to tell a young black man who had been drafted like me, who didn't want to be in this war, to go do something. At that time, soldiers were killing their commanders. It was called fragging. You'd roll a grenade under the bunk of the LT and get a replacement who maybe wouldn't ask you to go out on patrol tomorrow. Some of my classmates encountered that sort of thing. And I wanted to be with people who wanted to do the job. That meant the Vietnamese soldiers defending their own country. I had learned to speak Vietnamese rather well. I was fluent by the time I'd been there a couple of months. There were some days I didn't speak English, and I loved my work. I loved my people.
What were some, expectations you had before training, if you had any?
Expectations about what?
Just about like going in before training, if they trained you before.
Well, I had been a Boy Scout. I had lived in Europe for almost 5 years in my before I was 21 years old. I knew there were other ways, other cultures, other ways to be. I was not particularly political. I didn't have an axe to grind, but I was a city kid who discovered he was very, very good in the woods. I had a number of qualities that made for a good infantry commander. I was a dead shot, expert on 10 weapons. I had a great deal of stamina, but I was a disciplinary problem. I didn't take, there's a lot of, I'm going to try to keep this PC for you so you can air this if you need to. Part of being in the Army is being messed with. Sometimes it's for training, sometimes it's because people are just bored and because they can. I don't have a lot of patience for that. I don't suffer fools gladly. And I let people know, you do not mess with me because I will mess with you. However, in the Army, there's a hierarchy of rank, and that's a good way to end up in the stockade. So I was very clear by the time it came for me to pick my duty station what reality was. There's no question I was going to Vietnam. That's what I was trained to do. I was an infantry commander. That's where we're fighting right now. But I wanted to be in a context that I felt clean and good about, that I felt was honorable. I wasn't, as I say, particularly political. I wasn't gung-ho war. I wasn't gung-ho America. I had grown up in a family devoted to service. My father had been a Fulbright professor. He had been a foreign relations officer for the State Department. And I believe that we have an obligation as the most powerful and successful culture in history to assist other countries to gain and obtain their freedom. You can't give it to people, but you can help them achieve it.
Do you think your age had an effect on your experience?
Well, I can't compare it to anything else, so it's hard to know. I wasn't a 17-year-old kid, and there were 16 and 17 and 18-year-old kids that went to war and didn't come home. I was almost 25 years old by the time I got in country, so by most standards, I was grown. I was pretty immature in a lot of ways, but I was grown. I think my relative youth and my physical stamina was a great deal of help to me. I was pronounced dead. I shouldn't have lived, but I did because I had a lot of will and I was very dedicated to my mission. And this final mission, everyone was hit, and if I passed out, then everybody died. So I stayed conscious and got us extracted.
Duty, what does that word mean to you?
Duty. Duty is something that is placed upon you. How you relate to it is individual. I look at duty like responsibility. I could use those words almost interchangeably. I have a duty to my mission, and I have a duty to my people, to the people that depend upon me, on my decisions to stay alive. I took it very seriously.
Can I ask a clarifying question about what you said earlier about how you were declared dead?
Mm-hmm.
There's a character in our play who plays dead,
Mm-hmm.
and then comes back to life when it is convenient for him.
Good for him.
So I was just struck by you saying that, and I just wanted to make sure I understood.
I should have said I was pronounced dead. I bled to death. But there was a wonderful surgeon there, Dr. Cesar Cardenas, who got my heart beating again and brought me back to life. They didn't expect me to live very long, but I surprised them, and I'm still here.
What does duty mean to you now, being a veteran of the service you were a part of?
Well, it means the same thing it always did. As I said, I can use duty and responsibility interchangeably. Duty in the context of a veteran having already served means doing all that I can to ensure that my government fulfills its responsibility to those men and women who they have used to conduct their foreign policy. We have an all-volunteer armed forces now, and that's fine, but frankly, during these recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we treated the people in the National Guard and Reserves unfairly. We deployed them over and over and over again. because we didn't have enough people. There was not a lot of good planning prior to this war, primarily because the people that fought for it, the people that fought to have war and lobbied for it, had never been to war. We called them chicken hawks, people that buck, buck, buck. They want to go to war, but they don't want to do the fighting, and they usually don't want their sons to do the fighting either.
So do you mind sharing a little more what your experience was like during, being in combat?
It is immediate. Life in combat is technicolor. Life in real life is pretty much black and white. There's nothing that you can compare to it.
Sorry.
What is combat like? It is immediate. It is right now. It is be here now. Not 5 seconds ago, not 5 seconds from now, right now. Time slows down for some of us. And the closest thing I found in life to compare to, which is one of the reasons why I became an actor, is that this work that we do is immediate. It's real time. It's right now. When that camera is rolling or when the curtain is going up, then your mind is in the now. And it's moment to moment. And ideally, you'll do your best work as an actor if you can live in that moment. I've described combat as technicolor, and life without war is black and white. It's quieter. It's not as immediate. When I stand in the door of an airplane getting ready to jump out, that heart is beating. I probably just made your microphone jump. But it's right now. And it's unforgettable. You cannot forget the immediacy of that reality. And it has consequences, real life consequences.
Honor. What does this term mean to you?
Honor means having a code of ethics, a code of conduct, and adhering to it. Every young man that I moved through OCS, Officer Candidate School, was going to be responsible for 44 American lives. I wanted to be sure anyone I let through was up to that task. These words tend to feed back on each other: responsibility, honor. Honor is a concept of conducting yourself by a code of, by standards, by values. I do not lie. I do not steal. I do not bear false witness. I take my responsibility seriously. I realize that these men's lives depend upon me, so I make the best, most responsible decisions I can make every time, because if I make a mistake, people die.
What was it like coming back to the States?
Well, my return was unlike most, because there were people who were in the jungle on Tuesday and walking the streets in America on Thursday. I spent months and months in the hospital being put back together and going through more surgery, so I came back on a stretcher. So no one was spitting on me or calling me baby killer. I came back to Walter Reed. I was around people that understood where I had been and were respectful and considerate, and they tried to help me heal. However, that was atypical. Many, many Americans came back to a country who did not know what we have taught them since. My Vietnam veteran friends, my colleagues, taught America not to blame the warrior for the war. So now people will say to you, thank you for your service or welcome home, because they appreciate that we don't get to vote on politics. We don't get to vote on tactics. We don't get to vote on who we go to war with and who we don't. We have a mission. We take orders. We follow our rules, or there are things like Article 15s and court-martials, and there are consequences for not being able to fulfill those responsibilities.
What was it like dealing with civilians after having served?
Well, that's an interesting question.